Go ahead, Deborah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this Friday afternoon for this webinar on perfectly in perfect love, right in time for Valentine's Day. So we're inspired by all of the hyped up expectations that have come along with Valentine's Day. So I felt like a really good time for a webinar on relationship OCD. So you're joining us for Perfectly Imperfect Love, Tips to Recognize and Move Past Relationship OCD. And we are here with presenter Lara Efland. And these webinars that you're joining us are presented by ADAA, the Anxiety Depression Association of America, which is the leading nonprofit organization in the field of anxiety and depression. And we encourage you to take advantage of the many, many, many helpful resources on the website, adaa.org. My name is Dr. Deborah Kissett. I'm a member of the Public Education Committee. And I'm delighted to welcome our presenter. Lara Efland is a licensed clinical social worker with 15 years of clinical experience, 12 years of supervision, training, leadership, nationally recognized expert in the field of eating, mood, anxiety, and trauma-related disorders. And in 2021, she founded the Clinician Development Collective, a website dedicated to providing masterful clinician resources, which sounds wonderful. And as we move through this webinar, we welcome you to add questions and into the webinar chat. So I see you guys are already joining us in the chat and letting us know where you're coming in from. So as Lara is going to be speaking and we're going to be having conversations, I'm going to also be monitoring the chat box so that we're going to be injecting questions as we go. And so let us know what you're thinking, how we could craft the information that we're going to be sharing for you today. We probably won't be able to get to every one of the questions, but know after this webinar, we do look over the questions and then we'll prepare some kind of blog or some way to try to get to as much content as possible. That brings you guys here with us today. So we are ready to get started and excited to have Lara start our talk on Perfectly Imperfect Love.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. It's actually really awesome to get to do this with you and through ADAA. And welcome everyone who's joining us today. Perfectly imperfect, I thought really captured that. And Deborah, I think you were the one that came up with that. And it was like so spot on in the sense of, I think we all are given the messages that there's a perfect relationship out there. There's a perfect, or our relationship should be conflict-free or, bump-free. And then we start to really romanticize and really hope for things, to be so wonderful in the relationships that we develop, friendships, job relationships, love relationships. Today, we're going to be focusing on romantic relationships, but I just wanted to first just start out that really you can apply these things to any relationships that you might be struggling with. And especially when it comes to obsessive compulsive disorder. And we'll talk more about that. So this is a big passion of mine, and I'm really excited to be here to dispel some of these myths and to hopefully help some people that are joining us today feel not so alone in some of these really common feelings.
And just a little shout out to when we posted this webinar, when we started inviting people to RSVP to come, hundreds and hundreds of people very quickly RSVP'd. And so it is the kind of condition where it could feel like you are alone and there are so few people understand. And just the data we could say in terms of people RSVPing and joining us today shows that it really is a much more common challenge than it might feel like when you're in the depths of it yourself. So
yes. Yeah. And I'm so appreciative that there's so many more resources out there. There's so many champions in social media and podcasts, and who are really making all of these struggles more public. So again, there's not so much stigma. There's not so much of, I'm the only one, which is a very common feeling with OCD, is like no one can know these thoughts that are going on in my head. And actually how powerful it is to finally be with, people that understand, share those same experiences, and and are open about it as well. So today, in the hour that we have, which I feel like is going to fly by, we're going to really try to do our best to give you the most information, the most helpful information. And so first, we want to define relationship OCD, just in case anyone on this particular webinar or is ever watching it is new to this concept and how this shows up in someone's life. And then how it actually, it does kind of show up or develop over time in relationships and how that can be a challenge. We will also discuss ways to start to work with those obsessions, worries, and fears. There's things that, just right out the gate, when we work with our clients, both Deborah and I, specialize in OCD and anxiety, that we, from the first session, we're talking about it and we're working on it. And so this is something, we also want to kind of give, and hopefully you can take away from this talk. And then we want to review resources and also fantastic treatments and things that are out there that are evidence-based, that are really proving to show great benefit to those with relationship OCD, that there's so much more research, coming out about relationship OCD, where before we really didn't have that much. So again, there's lots of new things ahead that will really help shed light on, what this is and how to start to work with it. So the first, kind of opener I just wanted to start with is like, what is relationship OCD? And how do I know I have it? Or how do I notice a partner of mine or a friend of mine or someone, that I may have some challenges with or struggles with? Is it maybe relationship OCD? So there's actually different forms of relationship OCD. And one can definitely be partner-centered. So in which you're really honing in on your partner, your romantic partner, the person that you essentially have chosen to be that significant other in your life. And there's more of a focus around their behavior, the way they show up, whether or not they're moral. There's also relationship-centered. So this could not be a partner, a romantic partner, but instead this could be a child, this could be a mentor, this could be a clergy, this could be a figure in your life that you have expectations around or that you have thoughts around. It could be a family member or so forth. There's avoidant. So you are very aware of your distress, but you try to protect yourself from the distress by moving away or suppressing those thoughts or feelings, or trying to avoid anything that might bring it up. So maybe then, that may show up in it's harder to engage in more intimate relationships, where you actually choose not to engage in intimate relationships, whether that be romantic or just close friendships, because it's so uncomfortable, or it could be distressing or triggering. Uncertainty, just constant doubt and worry and overwhelm about whether or not, something could be wrong in the relationship, or the person isn't quite right, or so forth. And then perfectionistic. So really honing in on people's idiosyncrasies or characteristics, or the way their mannerisms, or how they talk, or the things that they talk about or not talk about. So there's like this really starting to feel like this all or nothing pull of like, if somebody, if a common example of this is like if a partner, answer, like you're all hanging out with friends, and then your partner says something a little off color, and you're like, oh, why did they say that? And your mind starts to just obsess over the fact that, what does that mean about him? Is he a bad person? Let me now rethink through all the ways in which that person, my partner said something also that was really upsetting to maybe somebody else, right? So we start to really hone in on how people are showing up or how people are talking, and whether or not that means something about them. And it's really hard to let this go. So let me just explain what is going on when this happens.
Laura, just to jump in there, because if you go back to that other slide, it certainly common to, we're all going to go through moments of feeling uncertain about relationships. And there are times to figure out, like, is this the right relationship? It is not the right relationship. So these are there, it's important aspects of life to look at this at different times, but it's really that urgency is a very big indicator also of relationship OCD. So it's that I need to figure out right now, that it feels almost like your pants are on fire. So it's not something I can think about tomorrow or next week, but I must figure out right now if this person is the right person for me or not, or I won't feel okay. So when it's not something that has the expansiveness to, like, it is something I need to figure out and I'll put some effort into it, but like, I need to figure out now.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Right. So it's gray sometimes, like we all have questions sometimes about relationships, but when it feels that desperate need to figure it out urgently, you're getting closer to that relationship OCD terrain.
Yeah, exactly. And that urgency causes that repeated checking or going through, and rehearsing all the other situations that you might have been in, because it feels like if I don't figure this out right now, then I'm going to miss a really big sign, or I'm going to miss really important information about this person. So you're right. Like it's like pants on fire feeling. Like no matter what you do, you feel like I cannot ignore this. This is a huge alarm. Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you. So relationship OCD, which is ROCD, if, kind of like as a short acronym, there's a maintenance cycle that's going on. And this is true of like any anxiety disorder, right? We see a cycle that happens. So the first point that happens is the trigger. So right in the 2 o'clock of this, this circle. So the trigger is, let's say you're at dinner with your partner and your partner and you are not talking, okay? And all of a sudden you have this thought, I'm so bored. But this boredom, like the fact that you just even felt bored, you immediately, it doesn't cause this response of frustration or, or irritation. Instead, it causes a panic, this feeling of like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? What does it mean if I am bored? So then we have these OCD beliefs. So if you kind of go over to the left side of the screen, things are not right if they're not perfect. So there's this core belief underneath this panic, which is, I can't be bored in my relationships. If I'm bored in my relationships, it means that there's something wrong. And I know that relationships are important and I want to be successful in them. And this is supposed to be, and let's say you're married, this is supposed to be forever. So the risk is incredibly high. The feeling now becomes, so what we call this is an over-evaluation, right? A feeling of like, if I have a thought, intrusive thought that I'm bored, that must mean there's something really wrong with my relationship. And now in some other things that, clients or others have shared, so then they start to look around the room and they see other partners laughing and talking, and they're having so much fun. Those are good relationships. And look at us, we're not even talking and I'm bored. What's wrong with us? So we start to seek for proof, okay? And in this proof, we only want to see whether or not we're a good match. But we start to kind of look for also ways in which we might be a bad match. So this urge just churns and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we start to think of the reasons why do I love my partner? I know I love my partner, but maybe I don't. Because I'm bored, it means I actually don't love them. For everyone else in this room, they love their partner so much because they're having so much fun with them, or I'm bored. So then, of course, we all want to feel better and we seek relief. So stuff it down. Nope. I know this is not a big deal. I'm not bored. I'm having fun. And, but then that intrusive thought comes back, the feeling of boredom or the worry that others may, be having more fun. You start to feel this cycle happening without your control. And you start to really, really struggle with the fact that you can't stop it when you think that you should. or that you can. And so we want to kind of talk about the fact that this cycle is out of our control. This is where our body and our brain are on autopilot, right? We can't stop this cycle from happening if it's already started and we haven't learned the skills how to do it yet. This is just, and so that's where I want to kind of give those that may be experiencing this panic, seeking relief, wanting to try to figure out the answer, to feel better. That's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You're actually doing exactly the way that we're all designed. We're problem solvers. We want to just solve our problem. And this feels like a really big problem. And there's something about this cycle, though, that the problem that you're solving or you're trying to solve actually is the problem. Okay. So we're going to kind of talk about the fact that it's more the response to the problem. Okay, which is the intrusive thought, I'm bored. And then the feeling of anxiety, the fact that now you're feeling this anxiety around this intrusive thought and the want to try to solve the problem of I'm anxious is actually causing this anxiety to keep going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're going to kind of talk about how do we take a step back and diffuse ourselves from our thoughts and start to see the fact that I'm bored is a thought and it is uncomfortable. However, it's not going to hurt me. It's just a thought. Okay. So we're going to kind of talk about that and how to start to work with that a little bit. Anything you would add, Deborah? Anything kind of from your...
just so helpful. What's interesting, working with OCD, treating wonderful clients, moving past OCD for many, many years. And every time it's like, right, yeah, it makes so much sense, but then it could melt away as quickly as it comes. So I would just kind of encourage you guys to make sense of this information, understand it, but then there's gonna be a moment where you're going to lose it again. Like, no, it makes the most sense to just give in to the compulsion because I'll feel better. So it's continually working this actually takes lots of effort because it is the most logical thing in the world. On the outside, when something feels bad, oh, I have a flat tire, you're going to fix it. So on the inside, oh, I'm scared, maybe I'm not in the right relationship, fix it. I'm going to try to analyze, I'm going to assess. Most of the time when we try to fix something, we get a car that's now driving. But when it comes to our emotions, that very urge to, I just need to fix it, gets them more locked in and just brings on more doubt. So it's very counterintuitive with the way we live the rest of our lives. And then one other thought that was coming for me was when you think about OCD, there's an obsession and there's several obsessions and C, compulsion. So when it comes to relationship OCD, the O, the obsession or the intrusive thought it's the, oh no, I'm in the wrong relationship. I'm bored. I'm unhappy. I'm making a mistake. I'm trapped forever in misery. It's the, oh no thought. And then so that's the O. And then the C of OCD in this case are the compulsions. So sometimes people will say that it's almost, there aren't external compulsions, but the compulsions often are mental compulsions that Lara just described. So maybe analyzing, comparing, like, well, in my relationship, we laugh this many times. All those people are laughing more. Or like scanning your body. How do I feel right now? Am I feeling the way I'm supposed to feel? So it might not look like on the outside someone's washing their hands. So a lot of these compulsions are mental, of reviewing, like, how did I feel in that other relationship? Did I make a mistake? Am I feeling that way now? Am I feeling as good as I did? And then there are some external compulsions that reviewing checklists. So maybe looking at lots of magazines, like, how do you know if you're in the right relationship? So trying to maybe checking with other people, getting reassurance, like, does it sound like I'm in the right relationship? So there's a lot of checking, reassurance seeking are all on the C part of it. The compulsion part. And I see that we do have a question that Lara, wouldn't mind bringing forward, will you give tools, rules of thumbs to discern between the disturbance and actual reality? So I have a few thoughts on that, but anything come to mind right now in terms of tools to discern between truly it's the wrong relationship versus I'm experiencing relationship OCD?
Yes. And I'm just actually going to jump to the next slide, because
then it looks like we're moving in the right direction. EC, so we're getting there.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such an important question. So the thing about obsessive compulsive disorder is that it thrives on vague uncertainty, and the fact that it's really hard. So self-doubt is going to be really high in these instances. So I first just want to say that obsessive compulsive disorder does not just show up out of nowhere. It takes common fears, common feelings, common intrusive thoughts. We all have intrusive thoughts that, oh, is this the right partner for me? Or, oh, I didn't really like that he said that or she said that. I wonder what my friends thought of that. We all have those moments of self-doubt or questioning or concern. It's about how sticky are those thoughts and how hard is it for our brain to find the next phase, which is, the probability. So the actual probability that means that now my partner is not the right person for me, or the probability that because they said something off color or, not necessarily as attractive to others, it still doesn't, but I've seen them in all these other contexts and they have seemed to be overall a good person, right? So we start to be able to weigh the pros and the cons or the justification of like why one person makes mistakes versus the other. We're able to start to work with our brain and those intrusive thoughts. Obsessive compulsive disorder really struggles to do that. And instead, it has that quick response and that urgency. So the thing that you're going to really help to discern, is this my OCD or is this just my thought or my feeling about my relationship, is really to look at how important does this feel? How big of a situation is this? Is it a justified fear? So is there behavior that's really going on? And it's showing a pattern and it's pretty consistent and it keeps happening. And I keep having this concern based off of something that you actually see, you actually have experienced. Then yeah, we want to follow that justified fear. We want to take that information in and really consider, okay, is there something I should be looking further into about this? Valid concern about, whether or not this is a good match, ultimately, because here are all the things that we don't like, or here's all the things that they want, but I don't want that. Or here are the things that, ultimately we're not necessarily going to grow together. We're actually growing apart. Here's experience and actual information that you do want to take in. And I think the thing that I always say to my clients is that actually working on your obsessive compulsive disorder will only help with this alarm system, because we all want to know a justified fear. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to know how to discern what is a fear that we should be attending to and what is a fear that we should be working with. And so attending to fears that actually are of concern. So do I feel like there's a tiger in the room, or is there actually a tiger in the room? So that's more what we want to kind of look at. What is it that our mind is really holding on to? Is there a difference in core values? And core values is not just, we have different values. It's core values, ultimate pillars, or, things that mean so much to you in the life that you want to build. And they're totally different, right? Those will be things that, of course, will bring up feelings of doubt or questions or concerns. And they are important questions and concerns to work through. It doesn't mean that the relationship can't work out. It's just a bump, or it's something that you really have to really work together on, to have big open conversations about. It's not poor intuition. Okay. I think I wanted to mention this because when you have obsessive compulsive disorder, what can happen is you can doubt pretty much anything, right? And so we don't want to get to the point where we're not listening to our intuition and we start to believe, oh, I just have really bad intuition. My intuition's off. And that's not true. It's just that the alarm system it's almost like triggering itself over and over and over again, that you can't hear when is it your intuition and when is it the OCD alarm. And it's not pessimism, right? So it's not back to that perfectionism. It's not just someone who is, just pessimistic and they just can't see, it's like the grass is always greener on the other side. It's not a judgment of the person. It's actually something that they need to be working through. And it becomes more of this obsession in that you cannot let it go. No matter how hard you try, you can't. Where pessimism, you can work with it. You can see both sides, but your mind just tends to see the negative first, right? But you start to be able to see both sides. And I love what Deborah said in the last slide, which I'm going to tie in here. And this is something else that I say to my clients, which is you are going to intellectually understand what obsessive compulsive disorder is and what it does to you. It is a whole nother experience and practice to emotionally understand it. And your emotions take a lot longer to work with than your intellectual side. And so it's not so much of whether or not this is rational, whether or not this makes sense to anyone, because that's not the problem. The problem is that your emotions are getting really triggered in these particular moments, and the relationship becomes the trigger, which means it's going to be tricky. Does it mean that you can't be in relationships? No. Does it mean that you're not good at relationships? No. It just means that you have something that you need to work with because relationships are triggering, right? And it doesn't mean that it'll be that way forever. And so I've also worked with people that really have experienced, recovery and remission from their OCD in relationships. And so I just also want to kind of get that hope out there as well. So go for it, Deborah.
Just wanted to point out that it's definitely possible to have both. So you can be in the wrong relationship, genuinely just not right based on values, based on aspects, and also be experiencing relationship OCD. So it's not just, is it relationship OCD or I'm in the wrong relationship? Because say you're in a relationship that maybe isn't best for you. The question is, and you might decide, okay, I'm going to spend it like a half an hour and just think through, what do I want in a relationship, and what are the top qualities I'm looking for, and what are the main aspects of my current relationship. I'm going to tonight from 8 to 8:30 just kind of put a little bit of thought into it. If you can do that, that's that's a good sign that you're maybe just working through, is this the right relationship, versus I need to do it right now. And there's nothing else that can be done. I can't think about anything else or do anything else until I think through this thought loop. And so because some people feel like, okay, it's either one lane or the other. You could maybe not be in the right relationship for you, but then also the way you're moving through those moments is through this relationship OCD. My pants are on fire and I have to put the fire out right this second.
Right.
And it's a complex process to work your way through a relationship. And OCD isn't the right problem solving part of the brain for something that has a lot of complexity, but our brain the OCD network thinks, okay, I could fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, we do recommend to first work on the relationship OCD before ultimately deciding, and that because it's very, very hard in the moment to really be able to discern, what is it? And I think even in it, that self can become the trigger of the obsession, is trying to figure it out. So we actually, we say, let's pause. Let's just pause on big decisions, and let's just focus on you, and what's happening for you. And this feeling in itself is uncomfortable enough. And so you will feel so much more relief just working on this. So then you will really be able to make, that clear decision for yourself. And when it comes to this relationship.
That's really helpful. That's really good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So how do we work with these obsessions? Because, I love, I do want to bring this back to something that you said, Deborah, which is they're just going to come. These obsessions are going to happen. The obsessions, we cannot control the thoughts that pop up in our head. We all have intrusive thoughts, every single one of us. And even in our work, as OCD therapists, we talk about our intrusive thinking. I always share with my, so I have little kids, and it's like every time I start to go down the stairs, I think of like, I'm going to fall down the stairs while I'm holding them, or they're going to fall down the stairs. And it's like, and now that I do this is for a living, and I talk about this all the time, guess what happens? I think about falling down the stairs all the time. And so I have to learn how, through this process, to recognize, like, the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more, and the more that I don't want it to happen, because nobody wants to fall down the stairs, correct? It's like, it is going to be anxiety provoking. Like, I feel my heart beating. Now, does it interrupt my life? No. I can continue moving on. Once I get down from the stairs, I don't even think about it again. Or some days it doesn't even come into my mind, right? And every once in a while it does. And so this is not an obsession. This is something that is an intrusion. It comes in, I work with it, and it's gone. An obsession, even when you get down to the bottom, even if I were to get down to the bottom of the stairs, I would be rehearsing over and over and over and over in my mind all the ways that, well, what was it that, caused me not to? Or that doesn't mean that, well, because I did it, I have to do it then the same way, so then I don't fall down the next time. So we feel like we do not have control, right? And so in order to gain control, we feel like we have to now rehearse, we have to do something about it. This is how people get stuck in washing their hands 10 times. This is how people get stuck in checking, multiple times in a row, even though they've already checked 3 times before. So the difference with relationship OCD is exactly spot on with Deborah. It is a mental compulsion, which means that you will not necessarily notice, or others won't notice, that this is happening for you. And instead, it may come out more in irritation. It may come out in reassurance seeking. It may come out in you really wanting to get the right answer, or really find out that what your intrusive thought was is wrong, right? So how do we start to work with these obsessions? The first thing is we really want to stop the compulsions. We really want to try to see the thought for just being a thought, and that we can work with this. This is not going to hurt me. It's not going to hurt my relationship. It's a thought that I have no control over. And whatever just came into my mind, there it is. And it's uncomfortable. What you can do is you can do a thought record. You can actually write down all of these thoughts that you're having throughout the day and writing it down. And I highly recommend that you also write down the times, we call these the wins, the win record. Write down all the times that you didn't ask your partner for reassurance. Write down all the times that you had that thought and you didn't go and check, or you didn't try to reassure yourself, or you didn't kind of go over and sit, or you caught yourself. You're like, oh, I definitely wanted to go and Google that, or I definitely wanted to look at their Facebook page, and I caught myself. Now, even though you may have then 5 seconds later gone to Facebook, it's okay, because you learned something. this is what we're asking in this work. First and foremost is, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn about my obsessions. I'm here to learn about my compulsions. And I'm here to learn why it's so hard and why I can't let this go and why it just sits and torments me. We call OCD the bully. OCD is a bully. And then it starts to really bully you, and whether or not you're doing things right, or how you caused this, or why this continues and what's wrong with you. All of that is just intrusive bullying. So we want to also start to work with you in the compassion that you ultimately have, something that you're working with. You're trying to get to know it, and you're trying to learn how to work with it. I liken this to, if you ever have just gotten a dog, or you've ever just had your first baby, you have no idea what this personality is like. You have no idea what their needs are. So we want to kind of start with our OCD in that way. I'm here to get to know you. I'm here to really, really come to understand what makes you tick, what makes you struggle, what makes you, what really makes you feel overwhelmed, and so forth. Are you urgent, scared, or overwhelmed? You have an obsession, okay? Do you feel like no matter how many hours have passed, you're still worrying about it? That's an obsession. So when we have these markers of urgency, feeling scared, feeling overwhelmed, feeling as though we're trapped in this particular cyclical thinking or feeling, that's a great indicator. Okay, I need to do my self-care. I need to do my coping plan. I need to figure out how to work with my obsession, because my compulsion is only making it worse. So, and that's exactly right. Compulsions were created to help us feel relief. We all want to feel better. Whenever anybody has a headache, what do we look for? A pain reliever. We know it works. And so here's the thing about compulsions. In the moment, they work. That's why we keep doing them. However, we don't realize is that over time, unfortunately, it makes the obsessions worse. It makes us feel more distress later. It makes us feel more uncertainty, more self-doubt. So the thing that we're actually trying to find, we're doing the opposite with those compulsions. And so we really have to kind of recognize, okay, this compulsion is not working for me. It's not helping me. And no matter, even though I really want to do it and it feels good in the moment, I have to come to realize that this really isn't going to help me tomorrow. So you can even do index cards of stating I can work with my obsession. I know right now this obsession is so overwhelming. What can I do to take care of myself? I know I want to ask my partner X question. However, tomorrow, this is how I'm going to feel. So trying to give yourself some external reminders, like how to work with these obsessions, and that the urgency in the moment is valid because it's triggering, and the response that you want to have, if it's going to be aligned with compulsion, is only going to make it harder. So how do you work with that urgency in the moment? The other thing to think about is, what is the worst case scenario? Because the thing about fear, anxiety, is preparing you for the worst case scenario. Your mind and your body are thinking danger is ahead. There's huge threats. So what is that? And we want to kind of look at it as, okay, here's the worst case scenario. What's the best case scenario? And then we kind of think, okay, if everything goes my way, what does that look like? Even if you don't believe it, it's okay. I still want you to write it down. And then I want you to think about, what's the middle of the road scenario? It's not the worst, it's not the best, but it's the middle of the road. And that's what we call in CBT, the reality scenario. The likelihood that we're actually going to hit the middle of the road is so much greater than the worst, or sometimes even the best. And that's okay, because the middle of the road, once you start to see both sides, you're like, I'm fine with the middle of the road. I could totally tolerate that. That's fine. We're trying to also build this muscle back of like, I can tolerate things. I can manage this. I know this feels scary. I know this feels really overwhelming, and I can manage it because I've seen myself do it, right? So it's about also building back your confidence with how to handle this distress. Deborah, anything you wanted to add? No? For any questions?
Wonderful. Our wonderful participants are jumping in. It's really great. So I really appreciate it. I think people really taking part in this and being interactive, and that's exactly what Laura and I were hoping for. So thank you guys very much. I before going to one of the comments, I was thinking of a couple of mantras that we mantra wear, or like maybe making a bracelet, or exactly what Laura was saying, to remind yourself kind of short-term pain, long-term gain. So if you kind of ride out the urge to check or to ask, it's not really pain, but short-term discomfort, but long-term, your brain's going to learn it can handle uncertainty. But short-term gain, oh, okay, I feel a little bit better. I just did a little 10-question survey of how do you know if you're in the right relationship, and I'm okay. So I feel a little bit better, but then long-term pain, because your brain is just revving up for more anxiety and more discomfort. And an interesting study that I don't have the exact details on, but the individuals never diagnosed with OCD, but they had all the sample population checking a door to like see, is the door locked? Yes, it's locked. And then go back, oh, are you sure the door is locked? And then the more they had individuals check, so individuals who's never in the first place were thinking maybe the door isn't unlocked, but the more they started checking to see if the door was locked, the more doubt that they started to have of like, wait, maybe the door isn't locked. And so the very act of checking, of doing compulsions, is actually creating doubt and uncertainty. So we engage in these things to create more certainty, but the very act of checking actually erodes our sense of certainty. And that's just for everybody. The more we check, the more unclear we are and the less certain. So it's a little bit of a trick, but that's what these compulsions do around relationships. More checking to figure out if it's right, the less clear you're going to feel of anything. Yeah. So I did ask people to kind of like some sample, if there's any like sample obsessions that we could maybe get to, do some exposure, or give an example of how we would do an exposure exercise with. So Laura, depending on what we have as the next slide, maybe we could address a sample obsession or two, and just talk about how we would do some ERP with our participants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My next slide is, just ultimately we are at tug of war with our OCD monster, right? And so ultimately we will need to drop the rope, because OCD is never going to drop it. Never. It's just, it is built, and its main reason that it even exists is to keep that tug of war going. So we really want to work on managing this overwhelming sense of like wanting to pull, wanting to tug, because once you pick up that rope, that's going to be the only thing that you're going to want to do. So how do we start to work with that and let it go? So yeah, I'm happy to take some examples and ways that we can work on it. That would be great.
Wonderful. So, and lots of, Laura, we lost you, but I bet you're still there, and you meant to maybe close off the screen, but I bet you'll be back. So, so some coming and going. So I'm just going to kind of, all the flavors are similar because it's relationship OCD around my husband, my partner is not the one because we disagree on things, or my girlfriend is not the one because maybe I could be more attracted to other people. So kind of a similar, so someone coming in thinking their core fear of like, I'm with the wrong person. This isn't the right person. We don't have enough fun together. And so we could both kind of talk about how like examples of exposures we might do with that. Like, for example, I might do imaginal exposure of maybe just starting with really exposure to that thought. So maybe sit there with the client, like, okay, and just keep saying, like, I'm with the wrong partner. I'm with the wrong partner. I could be with someone that makes me happier. I'm with the wrong person. I'm with the wrong person. And kind of, we just kind of practice like rolling around in it. I kind of picture like, instead of fighting really hard to not have it, even just with that thought, like, okay, we just kind of keep saying it, like, I'm with the wrong person, and just really like leaning into it. And so it's the opposite of that fighting that drop the rope. Instead, we're just like really get all in there and like, yeah, all right,
all right.
Yeah. All in there. So that's the first thing that comes. Larry, how about you? And
I love it. I love that. Yeah. So exactly. There's so many different things that you can do. So with the exposure therapy, we can lean into the distress. So I liken this to a boxer. Okay. So a boxer has to learn, and this is like not a dog, but like an actual, the boxing as a sport. And the boxer has to learn how to lean into a punch, where our entire body and our whole reaction, our intrinsic response, is to move away, right? So over time, the boxer has to learn, because the leaning in actually breaks the momentum of the punch and makes it not as painful or hurtful. So in order for, Are
you a boxer? How do you know that? That's great to know. All right.
I am a CBT therapist, and when I read this somewhere, and I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Okay. So I took it and I ran with it. So exactly that. So to be an exposure, become your own exposure therapist, you have to learn how to lean into this punch, because you are you're in it. You've got, OCD is a part of your temperament. It's a part of your mechanism as a human being. And so how do we work with it? And so one thing, when it's triggered and when there's that flare up, we have to find triggers in the world around us, because it's back to what we call safety behaviors. If you go in seeking safety to feel better, you're going to start to notice, oh, I'm already trying that. I'm already trying to find relief. I'm already trying to feel better, and it's not working. And because the reason is because we're starting to protect ourselves. We're starting to kind of put armor on. We're starting to build layers around ourselves because this is so uncomfortable. And instead, we have to do opposite, which is take the layers off, expose ourselves to the thing that is the most distressing. So we can do actual exposure therapy where, I've done this with clients, like going out for a walk. So and we can even do this virtually, be on the phone with your therapist as you're out for a walk. And you want to be in like a public area, and you start to notice couples, notice people who are having fun together, and lean into the thoughts that you tend to have that are triggering, even if they're not intrusive in that moment and they're not coming up on their own, you're going out with the intention. So an exposure is in a planned intent, with intention, with focus on, I am here to bring out my distress, because I have to learn that my distress is not something that is going to harm me. My distress is not something that I need to avoid. I can tolerate it whenever it comes up, because you don't know when it's going to come up. You don't know where you're going to be. And it has a mind of its own. So you kind of have to work with it. You got to learn how to play with it. So with exposure therapy, that's essentially what we're doing. We're going after, and ultimately, so I kind of think about, exposure therapy is like a rubber band. And so when you have OCD, you are going to constantly think about the uncertainty of things and the self-doubt of things and so we kind of have to go beyond even your intrusion. And so we may have to then go and read stories in the newspaper about other people who thought their entire relationship that this wasn't a good person to be in a relationship with. And they found out that the person actually was, secretly, a robber, or secretly, doing something immoral, doing something that was really, toxic. And ultimately that self-doubt was right. And that ultimately will then bring up, well, see, like, I can't let go of the self-doubt. Because if I let go of the self-doubt, bad things are going to happen to me, or my relationship's not going to end up well. So we actually have to go after the thing that we're most afraid of, and we have to seek it. And if we can't seek it in real life, then we do imaginal. So this is where we actually we write out, or we say it, and we record the story of exactly the worst thing that could possibly happen, and what that means for you, what that means for your relationship, or what that means for the world, or, in general, like, why is it so bad? Why is it the worst thing that could happen, in your opinion? And we continue to listen to that. We continue to hone in on the most distressing part of that imaginal, or like what we imagine it to be. And again, we throw out whether it's rational. It doesn't have to be rational, because it's not about reason. Fear is about what makes us worried, what makes us concerned, what makes us feel threat. And so we have to go after the threat, even no matter how irrational it may feel. The other thing, in relationship OCD, so back to the fact that relationship OCD does not come from nowhere. It's not just like, poof, all of a sudden I have it. We have experiences in our lives that contribute to the trigger, that cause the OCD to flare up. So you may have experienced attachment issues in your life that have caused the relationship OCD, have become the kindling to the fire. So for instance, experiencing divorce as a child, experiencing, affairs, or, experiencing difficulty in relationships, or other people having really tumultuous or chaotic relationships. And so we also, not only then will we be working on the relationship OCD, we'll also want to do some attachment therapy, because underneath the OCD, there is a feeling of, I don't know if I can trust someone. I don't know if I can really feel safe in a relationship, because I've seen the relationship not work out. I don't want that to happen to me. So we have this protective part underneath that also needs to be worked through and healed. Couples counseling can also be super helpful. And that also, ultimately, like, getting to a point, like, if you do start to work through the relationship OCD and you're like, there are issues in my relationship that I'm not okay with, couples counseling can be really great. Also, if there was a lot of conflict around the relationship OCD, that also can be really helpful, is just to have a safe space to work through that, of like, what that was like for you, or what that was like for your partner, and how you two can kind of work through, it's also, you two are also going through your own healing and recovery once you realize that relationship OCD has been a part of it. And rebuilding positive experiences in your relationship, making lots of effort to go out there and to keep trying again, because you deserve those positive relationships and those positive experiences in your relationships. And we also have to put the setting in motion. So going on those trips, or going and doing the things that you desire, or wanting to have that really lovely conversation at dinner, right? You can have those, and you may have to put some intention in them at first to start to build back, the feeling of like, bad things my OCD is not going to ruin this. I can be present. Deborah, I see you might have something.
Oh, just we got a little reminder on a time check, and we probably at some point maybe we'll even do a part 2 of this, because there's so many great questions and comments. I'm just gonna give one example of a question of what would be an exposure where if the fear is my partner is not attractive enough, or are they attractive enough, is the compulsion. So we might do an exposure of if it was an imaginal exposure, it could be it could be a story of like, okay, I'm never going to find my partner attractive enough, and I'm going to always be looking at other people, and then I'm going to live the rest of my life feeling unhappy and anxious, and then I'm just going to, so we kind of would try to get to the core fear and tell like a scary story and then tell it over and over again, like Lara said. So it's sort of like a scary movie where you watch a scene one time and it's terrifying, a little clip, but then if you watch it over and over and over again, you habituate to that scary scene. And we kind of do want to do that with that scary thought in our head that keeps coming up. So
yeah,
the attractiveness, like it could be looking in a magazine, like everyone's more attractive than a partner, this person more attractive than a partner, and just keep making contact with that thought until it becomes more like background noise, like blah blah blah, versus something really startling. So
yeah,
examples of how you play with that. My partner isn't attractive enough thought.
yeah. And I love your examples. And you know, that I think the first question too to answer is like, well, what does it mean to you? Right. So like, why is that when that thought comes into your mind, what does that mean for you? And why is that a bad thing? Like if you were to discover, oh my gosh, I'm not attracted to my partner. What is for you, what makes that threatening? So again, what's the worst case scenario? And so we want to follow that. We need to find ultimately what that means so that we can build effective exposures, because the reason that comes up for you could be very different for someone else. Right. And then, you know, so that's where we really want to understand, is it comparison? Is it a feeling of like, well, then what does that mean about me? You know, does that mean that I'm unattractive? Like that, you know, that's the things that I've heard for other people, is like it starts to kind of come up with its own life, so to speak. So we got to figure that out.
Well, given that we are near an hour, and I really think it's so great how in the chat people are really coming together and supporting each other with examples. So this just tells me that I really think continuing the conversation, and we'll speak with the ADA about having another opportunity to speak more on this topic. So thank you so much, Lara, for sharing your wisdom and your just overall compassion and loveliness with us, and your expertise on this topic. And thanks to everyone for joining us and taking the time out of your life. And so this will be recorded for future, and the questions will come up with some blog that helps to answer any questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. So yeah.
I definitely want to just end with this slide of resources, because I do feel like, you know, this is just the beginning as well. Like we said, this is 1 hour, and it's, you know, it takes a lot more to really work through these things. And there's benefits, you know, we always say, like with obsessive compulsive disorder, it's like there's great energy in groups. And in order to like really work through the nitty gritty of OCD, individual is really going to be so beneficial. So Anxiety and Depression Association of America, ADAA, where, you know, which is hosting us, will have great resources on this, and we'll continue to be building them. International OCD Foundation has, you know, a whole page dedicated to relationship OCD. And two researchers, I believe they're from New Zealand, actually have come up with an app. So check out ggtude.com. And it's really, they have done most of the cutting edge research around relationship OCD. And I highly recommend that you kind of check them out and see what's going on in regards to having, because there's so much research coming out on app support for obsessive compulsive disorder, just as a way to work with this intrusive thoughts all throughout the day. The OCD stories is awesome. Lots of patients have loved that and have found so much camaraderie just listening to others. And there are relationship OCD stories on there. And then Regaining Control Over OCD is also another a great podcast out there. And we thank you so much for joining us. And we really hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.